What happens in pathway 2? This is non-cyclic. Now, we call it non-cyclic because this electron, as you'll see, doesn't go back to chlorophyll, right? Which is, going to cause trouble for chlorophyll. Chlorophyll's not going to be too happy about leaving its, about losing its electron. But we'll see what happens, how it copes. It does this most amazing thing. So the chlorophyll loses an electron, just like last time. It's the reaction center chlorophyll story, right? The excited electron bounces around inside all chlorophyll molecules from one to the other like pinball, gets to the reaction center chlorophyll, hopefully. And the reaction center chlorophyll is the one that has the ability to be able to pass it on to an electron acceptor molecule. So far, same story as with pathway 1, right? But this time, something different happens. This time, it gets passed through an electron transport chain, just like last time, in pairs. So 2 electrons at a time get passed on from the electron transport chain to a molecule we haven't met before. And we need to just talk a little bit about this molecule, but not too much, because again, we'll talk about it later on when we come to respiration. NADP. We won't worry about the full name of it just yet, NADP. So the way I like to think about NADP is like a taxi. So on a Friday night in town. Friday night in town, it's closing time. And taxis are pouring into town empty to pick up people who need to go home. So people are coming out of the pubs, out of the nightclubs, and they all want to go out to the suburbs, out of the city to get home. So the taxis come in empty, they pick up a fare or 2 or 3, and they drive out to wherever they're going to the suburbs or whatever, and they drop off their fares, and then they come back again. This is what NADP does. It's a taxi for electrons. Not just electrons, but for electrons. So the NADP molecule, this is an empty taxi now coming along, right? It comes along, and it picks up 2 fares, picks up 2 electrons. And the electrons have just come off the electron transport chain. They just had a great time. They've been hopping along, having a fantastic night out on the electron transport chain. So they go, they jump into the taxi. And because they're both negatively charged and the NADP is positively charged, we now call this NADP minus. It was NADP plus, and we just added 2 negatives to it, 2 minuses, 2 electrons. So now overall it becomes 1 extra negative, right? NADP minus. So it's a negatively charged thing. Now, we're going to park that taxi just there for a minute. Because meanwhile, if you remember, I asked you to think about this back a little while ago. Remember about core chlorophyll. Chlorophyll has just lost an electron, and it's now that electron that it allowed off with with its energy, this excited electron, has just gone off and is just jumping into a taxi. In fact, 2 of them are, and they're going to jump into that taxi, and they are going to go off to wherever they're going. We'll see in a second. They're going off to another stage of photosynthesis, never to be seen again by the chlorophyll molecule. Now, that's a problem, right? Because chlorophyll can't just keep on hemorrhaging electrons, otherwise it'll fall apart. Electrons are part of the chlorophyll molecule. It can temporarily lose an electron. That's fine. It's adapted to do that. That's the point of it, right? And it can't just keep losing them. So it needs replacement electrons. And it does the most amazing thing in the whole of biology. The most unlikely thing in the world. In the biological world, there is no other example of something this kind of extreme, right? Chemical reaction extreme. What it does is it looks for a replacement electron, and the most obvious place it can find it, but again, kind of unlikely because it's so difficult, it rips apart water molecules to get their electrons. So its attraction for an electron is so strong, it actually is able to pull them out of a water molecule. Now, there's no shortage of water molecules around the place, right, inside the chloroplast. But it's just the chemistry of it is really unlikely. Like those electrons on water molecules are well attached to the water molecules. It's not an easy job to split water molecules apart and then take their electrons, thanks very much. But that's what chlorophyll is able to do. So it attracts the electrons from water molecules. Here's a water molecule. And in doing so, it splits the water molecule apart. Okay, sounds violent, doesn't it? So it rips an electron out of the chlorophyll molecule, causing the splitting of water. And water splits into, well, the two things that are water are made of, right? It splits into oxygen. There's the oxygen from photosynthesis that we were talking about earlier. That's just waste, almost all of it waste. Some of it can be used in the mitochondria for respiration, aerobic respiration in the leaf cells. But most of it's just going to be lost out through the stomata, through those little pores in the leaf that we'll talk about another time. And the other product is the hydrogen. Now, it's not hydrogen gas that's coming out of there. That would not be a good hydrogen gas, very explosive, right? But the form that it comes in are what we call H+ ions or protons. So if you remember, hydrogen is tiny. Hydrogen is basically a nucleus with a proton in it, no neutrons, with one electron flying around it. If you take the electron off it, the electrons there, that electron's just it's gone off to chlorophyll. All you're left with is a nucleus with a proton in it. So we refer to H+ ions as protons. So, and a whole pool of them start to form, right, from this splitting of water. You get a buildup because there's so many water molecules being split now because, chlorophyll is constantly losing these electrons. And they're all being taken off to the last stage of photosynthesis. So you get this lots of splitting of water going on as chlorophyll replaces its electrons using water as the source. And so you get this buildup of protons. We call it the proton pool, right? So one of those protons will join the two electrons. Remember the two electrons sitting in the taxi going home? They're not going home. They're never going home. That's the point. They'll never go back to chlorophyll. This proton will join them. And it'll get taken in the taxi, in the NADP molecule, along with the two electrons, to the last stage of photosynthesis. That last stage of photosynthesis we call the dark stage, or the light independent stage is the more correct term. So this NADPH, think of that like a taxi that's full. It's got the three passengers. It's got two electrons and one proton, one H+ ion. And it's gone off to the dark stage. And when it drops off its fares, its three passengers, then it'll come back empty again to pick up more fares. So round and around and around it goes. It goes from the light stage to the dark stage, and then back to the light stage again empty, and then full it goes back to the dark stage and drops them off and comes back again. That's pathway 2.